There was nothing new about Brexit. It was simply a reimagining of a romantic vision of Britain, in particular England, before it fell from grace in 1066 with the Norman invasion under William the Conqueror. This was the Norman Yoke Theory. Hopelessly romantic and historically inaccurate, its legacy was Brexit. The Norman Yoke Theory, a concept that emerged prominently in English historical discourse, posits that the Norman Conquest of 1066 brought about the subjugation and oppression of the brave English people by the Normans, imposing a yoke of tyranny and feudalism. This theory has been both a historical narrative and a political tool, finding resonance in literature and political movements across centuries. Its leitmotif is that we are victims of outside forces. Figures such as Sir Walter Scott propagated this theory, notably through works like Ivanhoe. The theory draws on the myths of a racially pure Albion. Benevolent knights roam the lands, protecting the weak and rescuing damsels in distress. Wise kings rule sagaciously. Their ladies are always fair and chaste. The people were content in their lot, and life was good. The reality was far from that. Knights were little more than thugs sent out by their baronial masters to dispossess the weak and take their land. By and large, rulers were vicious psychopaths who, in the absence of a legal code, imposed their will on the people of these shores by extreme violence. In contemporary times, this deluded notion has been revived by one-nation conservatives and has found a parallel in the rhetoric surrounding Brexit, which casts European bureaucrats in the role of the Norman oppressors. The Norman Yoke Theory originated in the medieval period and gained traction during the 17th century amidst political upheaval in England. The theory suggests that the Anglo-Saxon era was a time of freedom and democracy, which was brutally ended by the Norman Conquest. The Normans, led by William the Conqueror, imposed a harsh feudal system, stripping the English of their lands, rights, and autonomy. This narrative was particularly emphasized by Whig historians who sought to highlight the continuity of English liberties despite Norman impositions. Sir Walter Scott, a pivotal figure in popularizing the Norman Yoke Theory, significantly influenced its cultural and literary dissemination through his historical novel Ivanhoe, 1819. The novel, set in the 12th century, vividly portrays the tensions between the subjugated Saxons and their Norman overlords. Scott's depiction of the noble Saxon hero Wilfred of Ivanhoe and the cruel Norman nobles encapsulates the dichotomy central to the Norman Yoke Theory. By romanticizing the pre-conquest Anglo-Saxon era and highlighting the injustices of the Norman rule, Scott's work reinforced the perception of a lost English idol disrupted by foreign tyranny. Walter Scott's books made him rich, allowing him to live out his deluded fantasies in a baronial mansion in Scotland. The public bought into his theories of an idyllic past that had been sullied by contact with corrupt and oppressive foreign ways. Besides Scott, several writers and historians have championed the Norman Yoke Theory. Edward Freeman, a Victorian historian, strongly advocated this view in his work, The History of the Norman Conquest of England. Freeman emphasized the continuity of the struggle for English liberty from the Anglo-Saxon period through the centuries of Norman domination. In the modern political context, one-nation conservatives revived this theory to underscore a narrative of English resilience and continuity. This die-hard political faction, advocating for national unity and social cohesion, has drawn on the imagery of the Norman yoke to criticize perceived external impositions and promote a vision of a unified, independent England. The romanticized idea of an Anglo-Saxon golden age, interrupted by foreign domination, serves to reinforce their message of reclaiming national sovereignty and identity. The rhetoric surrounding Brexit has striking parallels to the Norman Yoke Theory. Proponents of Brexit often depicted the European Union as a modern-day Norman oppressor, imposing bureaucratic control and undermining English sovereignty. This narrative taps into the same romantic tradition that venerates a racially pure and independent England, free from foreign rule. The Brexit campaign's emphasis on taking back control and restoring English self-determination mirrors the historical grievances articulated in the Norman Yoke Theory. This enduring narrative continues to influence how English history and identity are understood and mobilized in the pursuit of political objectives. The concept of a racially pure Britain was never going to fly in a multicultural Britain, but the genius of Cummings and Farage was to camouflage the racial elephant in the room. Now that Brexit has been done, and we have thrown off the oppressive yoke of EU tyranny, the focus is on Muslims as the corrupting influence, or Jews. Pick an enemy. Who's next in line to be blamed for our perceived fall from grace? There's always someone to blame. The yoke's on us.